usually on the exterior of the.
Oh, all right, here we go. Good evening. Welcome to the Georgetown School Committee meeting of Thursday, January 24th. First item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes regular session minutes of January 10th, 2013, public relations minutes of December 19th, 2012, safety minutes of January 10th, 2013, and the acceptance of warrants 29V13 and 28P13.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is our student rep, Cole Martins, who's going to fill us in on everything in the high school.
Well, first thing, what we were talking about before was the play. It is Guys and Dolls, and that is the 7th, 8th, and 9th at the Georgetown High School Auditorium. It's going to be a really, really fun show, and I think everyone will like it. It's nice, fast-paced, and it's just going to be fun. So, also, I know that the basketball program's, coming to an end. They're getting to the last games of the season. Hopefully, we'll make the playoffs. And and also it's midterm week this week. So I know our last midterm is tomorrow. So I hope everyone did very well on their midterms. And other than that, I think everyone's, they're done with this second quarter, and we're getting ready for the next half of the year. So.
Hard to
believe
believe.
half the year.
I know.
The other thing is David Ingram is close to getting 100, whatever you get in wrestling when you get to like 100. So there is a meet on Saturday at Triton, and I think it's 9:30 in the morning. If anybody is so interested in going, it's obviously open to the public. And I hope a lot of people will go and support Dave. I think if he doesn't do it this time, he's got 2 or 3 other matches where he could, but he's a senior, so it would be really great for him in his career to reach that milestone.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on
Tell
the
the kids, maybe they'll all show up. 9:30.
on the announcements
Triton.
that they send around. They sent it out, I think, a week ago. So he hadn't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah.
It was in the record too. It was a big
Yeah,
one in the paper.
it's a really quite a big accomplishment. We were kind of afraid he was going to get it in Quabbin, and wasn't going to be much of a crowd in Quabbin. So I was unhappy for David, but happy for all of us that we might have the opportunity to actually be there to celebrate with him if he's able to do it at Triton.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Tickets for Guys and Dolls. Do you know when they go?
They're going to go on sale the week of the show, so I think starting
Okay.
Monday.
January 31st. I heard from.
Oh, January 31st. Oh,
Yes,
that's great. I didn't know they were
Lots.
doing.
Yeah.
So it'll
Okay,
be
then
next
that's good.
Thursday?
Then it's next
Okay.
Thursday.
And
Yes,
then
I
how
heard
do you
that from
get
Mrs.
them?
Cudmore.
And
You'd have to go.
can you buy them at the high school?
They might be selling them after school. I know they sell them during lunch, so you
Okay.
can send your kids to get them.
I'm sure if there are members of the committee who would like a ticket, if you tell me that, and then we can make an arrangement. I'm happy to contact Ally and say we need X amount of tickets for.
Yeah.
You just have to say what night you want, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
But for parents that are watching, they should know to send money with their
With their
children to
kids. Yeah.
school, and they can they can purchase the tickets
Right.
for them. Okay.
And they're $8 for students and $11 for adults.
Well worth it.
Very good. Absolutely.
Usually it sells out.
Yeah, it does. It usually does sell out. So I'm excited.
So if the news of it goes on sale next Thursday, make sure you send your money in next Thursday or Friday
Yeah.
at lunchtime. All right. So next up, is there anyone here that wishes to speak on anything? Anyone from the public that wishes to speak on anything on the agenda? Guess not. All right. Next up, Sandy and Jim Lacey are just going to talk to us about the budget process this year. I asked them to come to kind of outline, and they're from FinCom.
I'm Sandy Garrity. I'm
Sandy Garrity
back on
and-
FinCom, the chair.
And Jim
They don't
Lacey.
just let her go back on, she has to be the chair.
And Jim Lacey's still on
very good.
FinCom,
And was almost the chair.
and nearly the chair. So I just thought they could outline, like, this is the first time that Alana and Pam have gone through this with us. So
Okay,
if you could just kind of outline
sure.
what we're looking for, what we're trying to do.
The budget process this year, we're changing it up a little bit, trying to give a lot of the boards and everything a break, because the past few years, we've, as FinCom, have had like a meeting every week for over 12 weeks, and it is, as you know, coming every other week, it's a lot. So this year, we've decided to have the budget presented to us by the town administrator on the 30th, next Wednesday, at our meeting. And then on February 9th, we're holding a Saturday session here all day for the budgets to be presented to us. Now, we're not going to really go ahead and do the big full presentations for a lot of the budgets because there's not a lot of changes. We want people to hit the highlights as to what really is changing in their budgets. And we've asked for all of the departments to come forward with their salaries, the contractual expenditure, the contractual obligations, and then basically take level funding and then come and explain to us what you need above and beyond what the level funding is for increases in the expense line item this year. So your budget, we understand that you're not doing a hearing until March, but it's very difficult for us not to get some sense of where the school is by then, because we're getting close to getting, then we have like 2 weeks to kind of look at everything together. So what we'd like from the schools, and we would like you to come that day or some representative. You're not going to do a full-blown budget presentation, but basically, same thing. What are your salaries, the contractual obligations? What's that number? What is your special ed? Which is pretty, you're going to have a pretty good idea where your special ed is going to be, ballpark, for next year. And then what are your level fund expenses and what you think you're looking at as far as an increase? You're looking at 2% increase in expenses, 3%, something like that. That's basically the three numbers. So we can take those numbers and put it into the whole formula. Because to start with, we have to take what we have for the revenues, you take off the top the fixed costs, then you know what you've got left over to split for the budgets, for budget increases across the town. And it's in with these tight budget times and with stuff that's coming down from the State House, it's going to be tight. And I think you as a committee also would like to have some sort of idea. If we know from you, you're coming in with X amount, we kind of have a ballpark where we're looking at for the for budgets so you can plan accordingly instead of going through an entire budget process looking for huge increase when we know the money just isn't going to be there. So I think it's a good compromise. You still get to do your full budget, your budget hearings, and we know full well that you'll be coming back to us and doing now the full budget presentation as you've done in the past. And the numbers that will be coming to us on the 9th, we're not going to hold your feet to the fire on those. We know that they're going to be estimates, but we have to have some sort of an idea what we're looking at. You being the biggest part of the budget, we have to know whether one year we had, I forget what year you said, we had 130?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
After we paid, it was essentially health care. We had $130,000 for the entire town.
Oh.
Increase.
Increase. That's all it was.
Right, and so we need to have some sort of an idea what we're looking at before the end of March. So, not knowing, and the budget. By the time the governor's got all these great ideas for the budget, yay! It's going to be fluctuating, and we know that. So that's what we'd like from you. Not a full blown. I don't even think you guys would be there a half an hour, if that.
Because there's just two things that keep surfacing, and it changes every day, and it's based on the governor's budget.
Yeah.
Chapter 70, based on just what's come out in like the last 2
Yeah, it's supposed
days,
to go
I
up.
think that's supposed to go up.
Mhm.
So how is that going to play into?
I think what will
Us.
happen is that Mike will try to get a sense of how realistic that is. And he generally comes to us at some point, and it would be after the governor's budget, and maybe even after he hears something from the Mass Association of Mass Municipal, that he will sort of give us a sense of how much money he thinks we will have.
Okay.
And then we will take all of the increases that you guys have given us and put those together and match it against what we think the money will be.
Okay.
And then we can let you know what that is. And obviously if Chapter 70 comes in, then there's more money available, or if there's more money from something else.
The thing that I get worried about, and this is just something we have no control over, but I worry with him coming out with all this information now and the renewed focus on education, if there's mandates that are going to go along with that.
Oh yeah.
That's the only thing that I throw out there. But, I mean, you know as well as we do.
Yeah,
Nothing at this point. It's just one of
Right.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
we need to have some sort of a sense of. I mean, like I said, you've got your. You have your salaries and the contractual obligations. That's number one. You have your special education, which is you're going to have a pretty good, a somewhat of a handle on
I
it.
think after the discussion tonight, I think that what you're asking for is going to be possible for the committee
Right.
to give you a
It
number.
it sounds like we're moving, it just, in the last 2 days, I think that's when all this is just,
Yeah, it's gonna be fluid. I mean, but the thing is, we really need to know as a town, once we put the revenue in and to
Right.
see, once we put the fixed costs, we're hoping to get some reduction on that. Are we looking at $130,000? Or are we looking at maybe we might have $250,000, $750,000, at least to have an idea, and especially for you as the bigger budget to say, you know what, after even just what you've given us, which is a very conservative number, we still have such a small amount. It's something for you guys to actually understand going into your,
I would think so.
Yeah.
That we would know probably by the end of February, maybe early March, where we are. And I would think that you guys would want to know that.
yeah.
I mean, there's no sense coming to us and say we need $1 million and we don't even have 100,000. So that's
Right.
Well,
those
one of-
kind of gaps are not closable.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's all fluid, but one of the things that, one conversation we had with Mike Farrell, who asked the department heads to look at, a 2.5% increase or below. That's what he asked us to prepare. Obviously, we're trying to level fund expenses
Right.
and non-salary items as best, anybody, all the departments can. But, police have gas increases and, there's vehicle increases. I mean, there's some things you just can't control. The cost goes up. So, that, the committee has that in mind, as well. And we've already, the administrative team and I have already recommended some things, that maybe we would have loved to have, but they're not in the budget, in an attempt to get as close to that number as we can, because we do understand the financial constraints of the town. At the same time, we do have to operate our schools, just like every department has to run their business.
Right.
Right. So, I think after the conversation tonight, I think, the committee will have a chance to look at some numbers and get a sense of where we are in relationship to the questions you were asking,
Right.
Sandy.
yeah, because it is, I think, I remember when I did an analysis over a few years, it was when the fixed costs go up and those costs, and you've got gas, and you've got
Yeah.
some other things, you're taking utilities taken off the top. We were looking at, yes, the taxes are 2.5% is with Prop 2.5, but we were looking at 1%. Not even 1.5% available. So I mean that's one of the tough things that hopefully we're not going to run into this year, but
Yeah, we don't know.
we don't know. So
Yeah.
so what if you can bring that to us? Like I said, it'll be just good ballpark figures to throw into to get a sense of what we're looking at down the budget path.
And do you know in March when you're
Pass the
expecting,
packet.
like, our final presentation?
When is your
That's the whole-
budget here?
That's what I'm trying to back into.
Well,
Once you-
Right now.
what we're recommending is.
Oh, sorry, I don't.
That we had a revised budget calendar. We're recommending that we do the public hearing on February 28th.
Oh,
But again, that's what we're recommending. See,
Right.
we have
Oh,
to
yeah,
have
yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
conversation.
Sorry, you're recommending
Yeah.
what, the
Well,
February
here, well, that's
28th?
the first thing we want to do is look at the budget calendar together. Cole needs one too.
Oh, yeah, cool.
I got a calendar with me.
Is this an extra copy?
Okay.
Maybe we can give it to Jim and Sandy so they can at least see what we're talking about.
All right, so that's
Okay.
what we're, all right.
So,
Okay.
however you want to.
The whole thing or just the calendar?
Well, you can give them the calendar to start with, but, okay.
Right. So see, that's when you're looking at.
So this is just what we were thinking. Obviously, we're down to today, which is January 24th.
Yep.
There are 2 meetings in the month of February. So because the
We have a
committee's-
meeting on the 14th, not the 7th, right?
I think you're right. I think it
Okay,
is
no,
the
no, no, I
14th.
just wanted to
It
make.
is the 14th,
yeah,
you're right.
Okay.
How can we forget Valentine's Day?
That's when you're meeting to discuss your budget.
Yeah.
Bring
Valentine's
candy.
It'll be it'll be a sweetheart of a meeting.
Very clever, Ann.
Pathetic.
So the way, normally we would have 2 meetings to discuss it, but I think after you look at this budget with us, you're gonna find that there's really not a lot to discuss. There's, other than salary increases, and basically the principals have level funded or slightly underfunded level funding on their expenses. So there really is not much to talk about. You certainly we'll alert you to where we shift things, because for example, one easy thing is, you'll notice that the maintenance line looks different, because we had maintenance expenses in each school, and we made the decision to pull them out and have them be a district-wide expense so we can track it better. We did the same thing with special ed. It's not in the schools. So it looks like a decrease in the schools, but it's really not a decrease in the schools, just we moved the money to a different line, which we'll answer all your questions and explain that in whatever detail you need to have it explained to you. So we were suggesting, given that construct, that we can do the district Pearly and Pembroke budgets anyway on that one night. And then the February 28th meeting, we would do the middle and high school, the joint middle high school budgets, and the revolving account. So we need to talk, and we might want to move middle and high school up to the 14th, but we can take a look at that. That's the discussion we can have. But we do need to talk about athletics. We need to talk about school choice. What else do
Yeah,
we need to talk
revolving
about?
account balances, school choice, athletic funding, retiring teachers, and crossing guards.
and grants.
Yep, and grants.
Yeah. So I figure between those two meetings, we can get to the point where, and then we'll be ready for a public hearing, and then you'll need to adopt the budget. And then after the budget's adopted, then it can be
Then we present.
prepared and go to FinCom, and you can have, whenever you want us to come in for your meeting, we can do that.
Yeah, we have meetings booked on Saturday, March 9th as a tentative, and then on Wednesday, March 20th. So I guess the question would be, with everyone being so busy, as we get closer down, and also looking at the weather, and that's why we kind of did a couple meetings, because we had to cancel last year a couple of times due to some ice and things like that. I guess we can discuss, I don't know whether, if you would be interested in coming in on a Saturday for a few hours in the morning as opposed to taking up a Wednesday evening, so you don't have to tell us now.
Why don't,
So those are the
that
two
way we
Keep that in
can
the back of
float
your-
it out to everybody for their schedules.
And then see what happens over the course of, like I said, we've booked those times and we've kept some times open to be able to, do that. And we figured the Saturday the 9th will be the meeting to, we're gonna just tuck in and get the presentations done, and
I mean, Saturday's not ideal, but if we meet with you on March 20th and we're the last budget, when do you have to have your deliberations done? Because if we meet with you and then you have to
We
figure
have
out
to be
what the
finished, I
bottom.
think it's the first week in April, it has to go to.
So I'm asking this question because if we meet with you then, and then you get it done by April 1st, and then you come back and say, okay, sorry, schools, you're gonna need to make $250,000 worth of cuts, it's late to do it.
Right.
That's
Especially
that's
since
again
it's-
why we
especially
think
since
that
it's
we will
personnel.
have a much better idea
Yeah.
of that if you guys can give us that preliminary
Right.
number, and
then we know.
by the time you get to this point,
Right.
we'll have a very good idea. You won't have to wait until April 1st.
Right, because a lot of,
we hope, but that's the goal.
right.
Right.
So that way everyone's not scrambling in the last
The last minute.
minute,
which
the
we
last
always
couple of
seem to
weeks,
do.
yeah.
Right.
So if we shoot, do you talk amongst yourselves later on?
So
like
March
this-
9th and Wednesday, March 20th are the 2 days you have reserved, so we'll have
Correct.
to figure that out. Because our meeting will be the 14th and the 28th that month.
Right.
Okay.
The 14th and 20th of March.
Of March, yeah.
And
No,
like I said, I mean,
February.
No, well, of March.
well,
too.
it's the same
Same.
for each month.
Our
Our-
school committee meetings,
yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
Okay.
And if we think it's going to be really, because we have a meeting on Wednesday, the 27th in February. And I know it's going to be too early probably for you guys after, because you're doing the 14th and 28th.
When, I'm sorry, what was
Yeah,
it?
because
Yeah.
14, yeah, because we'll still be in the middle of,
Right,
Right. But by then also, remember, we will have a meeting the 27th, and if there's anything that looks kind of dicey, or you're going to get a sense from us
Right,
before your
we
meeting
would
on the
be able to
28th.
give you information for your 28th meeting, maybe.
So that'll be the, as opposed to really you coming to us and we're just don't have any knowledge of where your sense you think you're going to. So that way, as long as we have an open dialogue going back and forth, we can keep each other apprised as to where you are and where we are and what we think is going to happen.
and when the committee looks at this, I mean, if you feel that the 28th is too busy with all those things, and that the committee needs the opportunity not only to review that, but to have some deliberation time, the option would be to add, not that anybody wants one more meeting, but to have it be one meeting, single agenda,
On the
public hearing and final, just deliberation and adoption of the budget. That may make it a little more comfortable, but we can probably see how that goes and what kind of questions the committee has, and how
Might be able to
comfortable
decide
people
that
are
on
with
February 14th.
we end up having to throw in one
one
meeting.
more meeting, yeah.
There's usually one extra meeting, just because there's just too much to get through in 2 meetings to go through the whole budget, and people have questions, and we start thinking about what if we do something different. So maybe what I would recommend is we post a meeting for March 7th. Now, tentatively. And everyone pencil it in so that we at least have that flexibility. And
that
then,
would be,
Where we're not booked every single week, we too have the flexibility of adding in a meeting. That's why we're doing
Yeah.
it. That's why we're trying to
so if something
do everything
arri-
on a Saturday, because that actually takes about like 6 weeks out of it.
So if something arises in the back to my calendar. If something comes up on the February 27th meeting for FinCom and you have feedback, we're not going to be able to react to it on the 28th, but we have a fallback of a meeting of
On
March
the
7th.
Yeah.
right.
Right, exactly.
So-
And like I said, it just, as long as we keep going with an open dialogue, and I
Okay.
think starting with the 9th, it gives us a chance to really run the initial numbers to see what we think we're looking at.
Okay.
And remember, when we do the numbers, yes, we are always conservative because we'd rather sit and be conservative and find out coming close to budget time if there is extra money.
Okay.
And remember, we have to put the budget out and to get the FinCom book out because of that's the law. But as things change, which we've known things to change over the course of April, coming from the state, you know, it's not, we're never opposed to if something drastic big comes.
Right, I'm just thinking of how it's once it's posted, it's hard to, once the warrant is posted, it's hard to change it.
And when does the
Law.
warrant, when does it get posted?
It's 2 weeks before the meeting, so I'm not sure.
So
what-
Right,
Tell
but if
me
something
that
drastic happens with the
Usually
state,
it's,
all of a
usually
sudden.
it's the
yeah.
first week in April. I thought that might
First
get
week in
set.
April is when we have to have our budget done.
Right.
So that it has to go to a printer and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of a long process.
Right.
But the warrant has to be posted legally 2 weeks,
Right.
14 days prior to the meeting, which would be middle April. I think the meeting's
So-
like the 2nd or the 3rd or
Is
4th.
the meeting usually the first Monday?
Yes,
If it's
it
the
is.
first
Always the
Monday
first
in
Monday.
Okay,
May.
it's May 6th.
Yes,
May
Yes,
what?
May 6th.
May
May
6th.
6th.
always the first Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's the 20, it has to be posted by the 22nd,
probably.
The
Okay.
warrant.
Yeah.
the warrant. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But again, they probably have some printing
Oh,
issues.
oh yeah,
so it's
yeah.
before
It,
that.
it can't
I'm
be.
sure
It
it's
can't be
sometime
done on the
before that.
21st.
Right.
Right.
In listening to Bruce Tarr in a recent conversation I had with him, he laid out that the governor's budget will be by the end of the month. It'll come out. It's already starting to leak
February
out.
or
January.
January.
No, it usually comes out next Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his.
'Cause he
He's
talks-
already
his out
started to
pretty
leak
soon,
it out.
yeah.
And
Well,
it's,
and he'll be
you know.
speaking at the MMA, I'm sure, this weekend too, and
Yeah,
a lot of things
yeah.
will happen.
And then Bruce said that the House generally deliberates on the budget in March, and it usually comes into Senate and conference committees in April. The intention is to try to do all that debate in anticipation of having, with the goal of having a budget to start July 1. But it just, you know, I know every year we try to lobby hard that they try to move that process up a little as much as they can, just because here we are trying to deliberate and discuss a budget that we really don't have any fixed numbers. And honestly, that's why in the past, we haven't gone to FinCom until March, not because we were trying to hide any numbers, but because
No, it's
there
just-
wasn't any real information. And the thought was, you know, the worry always is the first number you put out, as much as I hear you saying
No, no,
you're going
I-
to protect this.
That's why
the
we're
first-
here to
Yeah.
The first
It's out in
number,
public, right?
the
Yeah.
first number the first number you put out is the one that the public remembers, especially if it's more of an increase than you know you're probably gonna, after your debate and deliberation, gonna come in and request.
No.
So you have, it's always a delicate balance with trying to make sure that the public information is accurate and it doesn't raise current concern and fear and worry on the part of people before it needs to, or maybe it won't even need to. So I think that's, just as an explanation, that's why, for the committee members now, just so they understand that that's why we did it we can produce a budget in December. But the discussion is we produce a budget and its numbers, but no one has any real numbers to know whether or not, other than what the town can muster in what they know is available, they don't have any good numbers either as to what was gonna come in from the state. So,
We used to always get numbers from the state in March, so everybody, the whole
Right, you
state
can
would get all the
plan on
numbers.
that.
You could plan the budget
We
numbers
don't
used to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
so that's the place we find ourselves in, and it's a shared dilemma, for sure.
Right.
And if you don't, and I guess if it make it better, if you don't want to give us the 3 breakdown numbers and just give us one flat number and you know what it is, you know, that's fine too.
Well, let us discuss it, because
Yeah,
I
let's-
think it's,
Because
I think,
then I can understand your concern, because this, you know, those are the 3 numbers, and it doesn't matter if you add them all together and say, here it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and there's no detail. I don't, do you have a problem with that?
Well, let's see.
I
Let's,
guess, I
You know,
guess
I
I
think-
will a little bit.
I think
but-
I think that we're going to be able to do what you need.
Okay,
Yeah, I-
okay,
I-
all
I
right.
think
Just-
Let's see what we can do. All right.
I appreciate the
Public-
flexibility.
And I think from a public perspective, it's so difficult to give one number because I agree. I mean, it would be easy just to say, all right, our budget last year was 12,610,000. 2.5% is 253.25. There you go. You know, that would
Yeah.
then you're done. But there's so many moving pieces,
And there's a
in
story
there
behind the numbers.
that people need to understand the whole context of it.
Yes.
Right, and that's the thing with the salaries is that you have contractual obligations. So that really is, when you look at it, that's a fixed cost.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are the things that we're trying to.
Yep.
We want to work with everybody, but we need to have time
Yep.
because we don't want to be rushed. Because I think that just makes everyone just so frustrated at the end.
Yep.
We don't want any frustration.
No.
The process shouldn't be painful.
It shouldn't
And
be.
you put that on record now too.
Shouldn't be, it shouldn't be painful.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else we can answer for you?
Questions, anyone?
You're more than welcome to stay and hear what we're going to talk about if you want.
I
Otherwise,
think there's a
we'll-
fire
Ah,
going in
that's
our
right.
house.
I
Both our
have a
house.
nice wood stove.
Yeah, I got a
All
fire
right.
going.
Thanks a lot.
But thank you very much for the offer. It was
Just wanna
really
extend the-
appreciated.
February 14th will be here too. So
And she
if
said
you-
she said she's bringing candy. I heard that.
You can watch us on TV.
very
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Jen.
Thanks for coming.
All right. So what do I do with my agenda? So I'm thinking. So we'll go into the budget deliberations. Are there any? Do you want to do that now, or let's just go through the business?
Which one? Oh, yes.
You want to just go through the agenda?
Yeah,
and
go
then,
through the
okay.
agenda, yeah.
Any questions on the superintendent's information for the committee?
Gotta find the agenda.
We don't have any information.
We have.
Okay, so we don't have. You know what? There's nothing to go through.
That's well. If anybody has any questions about anything on the budget, I mean, Joan's going to do a quick second quarter budget report and some funding an update. We can do that part if you want, and then go right into the budget if you want to.
Do you think would it make sense to do the second quarter report so that everyone understands where we are before we start talking about the budget?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so
So you have the Munis report. I know that's somewhat
Right.
difficult to read.
that's this for everybody's benefit.
Okay.
Yep. It says FY13 second quarter report Munis on the upper right.
Right. I didn't do a monthly budget report in addition to it because we had a payroll post today, and the encumbrances don't liquidate till Monday, so the bottom line would have been in double in the negative of what that number is. So I didn't want to have people have heart attacks like I had one week. So, but I mean, we're on track. If you look at the special ed on the top of the second page, that's changed, and I have an update
Okay.
attached with the breakdown of how we spent the part of the 250,000. So basically, even with the 250,000, we're going to be over in special ed, but we have 290,000 that we're getting for circuit breaker reimbursement this year. So I'm not concerned that we won't be able to meet the obligation there.
Okay.
Basically, we're gonna have about $200,000 left as a balance in the budget. Part of that is student activities, so that's a commitment. $60,000 of that is a commitment. But other areas that, I'm watching right now, we haven't frozen the budget. The other areas I'm watching now is long-term substitutes. We have a lot of medical leaves, maternity leaves, so those costs have increased. So we're up there, so we're watching that. Really, besides special ed and substitute lines, there's no fuel and there's no utilities in this budget, and health insurance, which is where you typically have your problems. You can't predict what fuel, if we had our own buses, you don't know what fuel's going to cost. Everything is pretty much contractual, and we're right on top of special ed right now. So right now, we'll end the year in with a slight positive balance, but we may have athletic issues.
Yeah,
Food
athletic budget's not
services is right on the border. Every month we kind of sweat it out a little bit, make sure we're going to be able to make payroll. So those will be a couple of areas that we'll watch. but other than that, I mean, we're
So
pretty
while
much
we're
on target.
showing a balance right now,
Right.
net of student activities, we still have three things that could chew that up
Right.
very
Right,
quickly.
right.
Right.
Being long-term subs, athletics, and food service.
And special education. I mean,
And, well, and
Money
notwithstanding
changes-
special
right.
ed. Okay.
okay. So we're not predicting to end the year on the wrong side.
Okay.
Yeah,
At
because we
this point in
can't.
We
time.
can't, right.
Yeah, but we can't, but that doesn't mean we
Right.
can't
We
be
don't need to
stressing
take,
about
we don't
it
need
for
to
the
take
spring.
actions
Yeah,
right now
that's
to
Right,
right.
make
I don't
sure
want
that
to.
we,
I don't want to implement budget freezes if there's, they're just changing over to the second semester, at the, at the middle high school. If there's things they need, then we hold it, and then we end up with money at the end of the year. It's crazy. So I'd rather them be able to spend their money. So we're not implementing a budget freeze. And as I said, I mean, if you had utilities and health insurance in this budget, I would probably be freezing the budget because I'd be very worried that we weren't going to make it with the, the cold weather or the price of fuel. But we don't have those. I mean, the town has them now, so
okay.
I feel comfortable where we are right now. And the second piece of that is the next piece of information I gave you about this year's budget
Okay.
is a memo that I've written to the committee regarding the breakdown of how the $250,000 that was appropriated from free cash to try to help us solve our problem in special ed. To date, we have, of course I don't have my total here, but to date we've expended almost 45,000, and we've encumbered another 164,000. So I know that there's another $8,800 that needs to be encumbered for transportation. So at the end of the day, we may not use up all of that 250. We may have a balance of 30,000, which we said we would track the special ed kids that we targeted for that money. And even if we're over and we're going to circuit breaker for it, these were the kids that we targeted, and these are the costs currently that we're projecting.
So with this, with this amount, next year, we believe that we would be responsible for 100%. Well, 100% less the circuit breaker and less the reimbursement, but for tuition would have the 36,000 we'll be responsible for
For the transportation.
for
right.
transportation next year.
Well, what I have, with the new budget packet, we have projections for all these students.
Okay.
With transportation
page.
costs, with percentage increase for the transportation and tuition, so.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
that's
So-
gonna be the question, we're not gonna have, we're gonna have the 250, we're not gonna have the 250. but
Right,
that's
because I
the
guess the
question.
issue is, while, I mean, of course, we're immensely grateful to have the 250, and it helped us this year. These are all new students that we're responsible for funding next year, which Joan has laid out at the end. So while we, had the 250 this year, we're still gonna be on the hook next year
Yeah.
for this.
So, and we're gonna
But
drill
we-
that down.
So we
Well,
also have students that are graduating.
Graduating.
We
Right.
have students that are aging out,
Okay.
so we do have.
It balances.
Okay,
Okay, so in a minute, I'm gonna just have Joan walk you through this, but I wanna give you a little, we're gonna try to tell you a story here as to how this is gonna work. And at the meetings that are upcoming meetings,
can we just back up for
Oh,
1
of
second,
course, Ann.
just for Pam and Alana, so they don't think this is how we do the budget. Normally, what Carol would do would be sit down with us and walk through like all of her assumptions and give a brief overview of all the meetings she had with the administrators, kind of explain what they're looking to do, what their initial presentation included, what they actually cut out, what's not included in the budget, and we go school by school. And then we do special education, revolving accounts, and grants separately.
And that's what you'll do in the next two
And we're
meetings.
gonna do, we're doing that in the next 2 meetings. This is not normally how we'll start out the process saying, here it is. You'll get all of the information behind Pearly salaries and operations. So you'll actually be able to see exactly what's going on within the school. I just didn't want you to be overwhelmed and think, great, I get 4 pages, I get to decide
No,
what to do with
no,
$13 million.
No,
So
you'll
we're
get-
trying to get to a place for FinCom.
Right.
For that
that's-
February 9th
Right,
meeting.
yeah.
Right,
Thank
right.
you.
So the story we're gonna tell you is, well, first of all, we're trying to answer those 3 questions for FinCom. So on the first page, it's just high-level summary data. Okay, so in the first box, the first table, I guess you'd call it, if you walk yourself across the table, you'll see 11, 12, 13, which is this current budget, and then the proposal, okay? And you'll see the breakdown in each of the categories. Joan has that all done. You'll see the difference, okay? And then you'll see the percentage increase or decrease. All right, so for example, that buildings and grounds that you see go up 50%, it's not 50%, it's shifted out of the building lines into the district line. Okay, so just moving the money, so obviously if there's not as much money in a particular line, and we take it out of the buildings and move it into one line, it's gonna look like a big increase, when it's really not a big increase, it's what
not.
we spent, it's level funded.
It's level funded, right?
It's level
not
funded.
an increase at all.
For example, the middle high school did not go down by $426,000.
Right,
No, I segregated out the, and we'll go through this when you
Yeah.
go through the detail in the next couple of meetings, but I took, all the teacher aides were budgeted at the middle high school, the one building, and so I had separated them out into middle and high school, so we could really track where they were, so, yes, that really didn't take it.
one of the things that Joan has done in her, I'd say brief time here, even though it feels like she's been here forever, which is a good thing.
Which is nice.
Which is a good thing.
Very nice.
Is she has really worked hard. She knows Munis very, very well. She's really worked hard to make sure, working with the administrators, that everything is tracked in the line it should be tracked in. Whereas there were situations where, it made sense to whoever the business manager was what went there, but it wasn't clear to everybody else. So she's taken and looked at every line, and it's clear what gets charged to what lines and what account number, and then she's made the shift. So going forward, it should be very clear, going forward, where things are charged, and you'll see really actual expenses. So the first box, and again, Joan can answer any individual questions. You notice the difference if we don't, see this 250, Ann started to say the 250 that we got from the town was from free cash, which is a one-time, we're helping you out, but you can't count on it.
Right.
Okay, even though, as Ann said very well, that the expense doesn't go away. But
Yeah.
the sort of assumption is you gotta figure it out, right? You gotta make it work within your budget.
The next year.
Yes,
Correct.
so without that 250, right, the budget increase is 4.6%. If, by some chance, some money was able to stay in our base, and that's the discussion with FinCom, right? Is then our budget without that 250 goes up 2.56%.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make
That's
sense
the-
to everybody?
Makes
All
total
right.
sense. Yeah.
So then if you go down a little further, the next box is salaries, because remember Sandy asked, what are your contractual obligations? So Joan again took everything out, same comparisons, 11, 12, 13 revised, 14 proposal, the difference, and you can see that this overall salary increase with contractual obligations for all bargaining units and non-union, union and non-union is 2.5%, which is consistent with what other town departments were given in this, this year. And then you go down even a little further. See, we're drilling down, right, from the
Yep.
total to the salaries, because basically your salary is made up of those two things, salary and non-salary items. So the operations, in the operations budget, it actually goes down but just understand, if we put the special, so we took the tuition and transportation out
For special
for
ed.
special ed. If that goes back in the budget, then it's a, what is the increase, Joan, if it goes back in the budget?
9%, I think.
It's a 9, so operations goes up 9% if you have the special ed tuition and transportation in there. All of the other special ed operational expenses like consultants, supplies, legal services, those are considered operational expenses. Those are reflected
Under operation.
under operations.
The only
What
thing under tuition and transportation
is tuition and
strictly
transportation.
tuition and transportation.
Right.
And why did you take that out?
Because we're trying to show that,
How volatile it
we're
is.
trying to show that if we have a 4.6% budget increase, the salary increases aren't the problem. It's 2.5%, and our level funding every other expense. In fact, we're below level funding. It's special ed that causes the
This
increase.
huge increase. Okay, that's
That's
yeah,
that's the point where, that's the story we're telling here.
That's a great job here of telling that
Okay.
That's how we
story.
tell the
Okay.
So then, that's the summary level page. Now we're gonna drill down a little into each of those categories. So we're just gonna focus on salaries for a minute.
Okay.
All right? So here are the assumptions that we made. So the teacher salaries include a 2% negotiated increase, step and scale. That was figured in here. Custodial salaries there, and I believe the third year of their, second year of their contract, and their negotiated raise was a 2.5, including, they have a couple steps. Food service, food service salaries include a 2.5 negotiated increase in their steps. Support staff at GISA, we're currently negotiating with them, but we did have to identify, a funds in the budget, and Joan will show you kind of where that's nestled. Administrative raises are negotiated every year and will be negotiated in the spring. Proposal includes the reduction of one classroom teacher at Pembroke, because the bubble that's there is moving out, so that the only change in personnel in terms of overall FTEs is one person.
What bubble do they have still there?
They have, their fifth grade is.
Huge, right?
Oh, really?
Is bigger than their other classes, so,
Okay.
yeah. There are no new positions added in this proposal that hit the budget. Doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have to find other sources of funding for things that we might need, but it doesn't hit the budget. It includes 4 teacher retirements. And replacement salaries aren't budgeted at their current salary. They're budgeted at 56,698, which I believe is here it is, step 6. Basically the master's scale, step 6. So we might hire someone less expensive than that. We might hire somebody more expensive than that. So we try the principals have been amazing finding really great, talented people, at less than this amount. But there are some positions because of the specialty of the position, we just need to, make a choice for a more expensive salary. 3.5 FTE teachers are still charged to school choice. So we have not, remember, we've said that that's a problem with sustainability, but if we move it from something from school choice into the budget, then the budget increase goes up. So it's a delicate balance, but just for your assumption here, is that they are still charged to choice. 10.3 FTE staff are charged to revolving accounts, which means that those revolving accounts are, they're sources of revenue, but you have to be careful that you spend as much of the money as you can on the things that you're raising the money from the revolving accounts to do.
Can you give me just an example of what that FTE staff, who that is?
Food service?
No, food service, I just
no.
made a note, I don't have food service in here,
No, it would be,
because they're so.
Athletics?
it's
There's some
point,
athletics.
I'll give you. It's a good example is the .4 counselor, the school adjustment counselor at Pearlie is paid for out of the extended day revolving account.
Okay.
And the preschool teachers are paid
Out of a preschool
Yes, the
revolving
preschool-
account.
Matter of fact, now
The
all of the
LE
preschool expenses,
aides, yeah.
including the aides,
Okay.
are paid out of.
Sure.
So,
the
so
that
we
revolving
makes
would,
sense,
yeah,
because-
so,
yeah.
because you have the preschool revolving
Right.
account. What we couldn't do, for example, is, if we had a new computer software, that we wanted to get for the middle school, we couldn't charge that to a preschool revolving account.
Right,
So that's
right.
how that.
And then 5.8 FTE staff are charged to grants, which accounts for 8 tutors and aides. 4.0 FTE are moved to the IDA grant. One of the things that the town is always looking to us to help them with is the collection of reimbursements for Medicaid. We don't actually benefit from any of those funds. It kind of goes into the town's pocket, or not pocket, but pot of money, pot of available money. So there are ways, though, to be able to increase that based on how things are charged. So we had some things charged to the 94-142 IDA special ed grant
Tuitions.
Which
is the big
tuitions.
money.
So tuitions doesn't allow you to get as much reimbursement. So
You can't get federal funding from two federal funds. So if you charge to the special ed tuition to the IDEA grant, it's not Medicaid eligible. So you can't get reimbursement for aides. You don't get reimbursement for Medicaid. They don't come into play. So we just switched them. And so that the tuition is now in our budget and the aides are on the grant. And it doesn't affect Medicaid reimbursement for us, but it will help the town
Town, it helps,
gain
sure.
more. Because our Medicaid reimbursement has been really low. And I think
And they count on it.
And we've been noting that for a couple of years
Yes.
now, that the reimbursement rate has been low, and
And I think it was because the tuition was on the grant, and that's where you get the most bang for your buck with is tuitions.
So it was a strategic move to try to also to provide. It didn't hurt us in any way, but it also provided a benefit to the town. Okay, so then going down to the bottom of so those are the assumptions. That's what we what's behind the salary account. Then one of the questions that always comes up is, well, what's does your budget represent everything? And our budget in salaries and positions does not represent everything, as we saw in the assumptions above. So this is how it breaks out, though, in terms of the funding sources in 2013, and then in the projected budget for 2014. How many FTEs will be are scheduled to be paid from the district budget, which you're going to be talking about, the grants, the revolving accounts, and actually school choice. So actually, when we look at 82.9% of our total budget is salaries, and as Sandy said, they're somewhat fixed. And Joan and I were also talking about this today, that, we have a $12 million, 12.7 budget, but we run a $14 million operation.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are salaries on other accounts that don't hit the budget.
Okay, right, makes sense.
Okay, so that answers, the FinCom's question a little bit about, here's what our salaries go up, and then basically here's why.
Yep.
And the thing that I think everyone needs to be careful of, when you look at, we went down actually 1 FTE
Right.
from 13 to 14. And then the percentage increase is fully loaded, in that if you had people coming in and out, and it accounts for if we had to pay someone more than we had in the year before, not from a percentage increase because of the union contract, but just by virtue of hire. That distorts the percentage increase
Yes,
a
it
little
does.
bit
Yeah.
when you divide the total by the number of FTEs.
That's correct. It does. It does. And this does include the contractual obligations. Those are absorbed in the cost of the salaries that go on these other sources. Okay, are there any questions about the salary, general salary information overview, and then the drill down information? Pretty clear? All right. So then
And we can ask questions as we
Yeah,
go
go
through
along.
this,
Yeah.
So don't feel like if
Right,
we went
no,
through
yeah.
it, it's locked. It's
No,
not.
absolutely not. And then moving to the next page, there's not much to say about operations information. But the building requests were level funded or slightly reduced as proposed by the principals. They really looked at what they need. I'm sure there were many things that they would want. There were a few things that, such as some software we wanted to buy for the new teacher evaluation management system, the software for the curriculum mapping. There's some software for the tracking our IT and computer inventories and work that needs to be done on our computers. We at one point, at first blush, did not put it in the budget, but we did put it in this budget. So those things are included in the operations costs. Special education transportation tuitions were centralized, as we talked about, and Joan can show you where that is if you have questions. Moved to district-wide. Same thing with the maintenance. Operations is basically level funded, but special education represents a 2.8% increase. Allocation for regular education transportation is consistent with our current contract. We're actually in year 2. So it was pretty easy for us to basically predict what that would be. Less predictable to the tune of $100,000 difference in special education transportation. That went up $100,000, or scheduled to go up $100,000 in the next budget. Okay, so I don't know what else to tell you about operations. There really is
There's
nothing. I mean, the principals, when they have a chance to talk about their budgets, you may have questions for them, but basically they prepared the budgets and that they feel they can run their schools with. And I think everybody was mindful of the fact that the increase, needed to be something that the town would probably be able to get, and we could continue to run our buildings in our district.
I just want to apologize because I see they don't matter, but there's some typos in here. I'm appalled that I see.
Okay,
Like
well,
private date instead of private day.
And we'll fix it.
Right.
Additional special education information, because this is a question that always comes up. So tuitions are budgeted at a 4% increase. Now, as Ann tells the story often, the state is kind of prone to sending us letters that basically say, or actually the private organization would send us a letter saying, we've been approved at the state level for a 32% increase in tuitions.
That happened this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we have to be more conservative than that because we don't have the information. So, but we have budgeted. We also don't want to be caught without any increase.
You can't look at the past 3 years of what the special ed tuition increases were and come up with an average and use that?
No,
I mean,
'cause the placements, we had tried that last year. That was one thing that we looked at, because it was 10, 20, 32%, I think was the highest we got.
Yeah.
The placements vary, and the percentage increases
Right,
vary.
and not everybody goes up like that either. Though I mean, there were some extreme cases. I would say every tuition, every school didn't send us those kind of things, but there were at least 2 in one year.
Those were really big
They were
blows.
and in some cases,
And they're negotiated by the state.
That's it. So that's one of the things the Superintendent's Association is often, putting on the table when they they go to hearings is, what, hey, if please, it's a double whammy to us when that happens. So it also includes the reduction of 2 students who will graduate in June, 1 in a private day placement and 1 in a collaborative placement. It also includes a reduction of students who will age out during the year, and 1 student in a residential location. It also does not include an estimated $300,000 in circuit breaker reimbursement. Tuition is budgeted also at a 4% increase. So we start with those assumptions. Transportation. We start with those assumptions.
Yep.
And then Joan took the time to take a look at the list that was provided by Donna Straight and her office to look specifically again at the numbers of children, the type of placement that they're in, and basically what the total cost of the actual students we know of right now will be for next year.
So does that 1412 include, for the FY 2013, the 1412, does that include the
Yes.
200,000 that you identified?
With
For this?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
For
okay.
it includes every
Every-
student we
Right.
know today.
Right.
So when you look, so this is kind of interesting. When you look at the 1412 that we have for 2013, we're going down $18,000 from 13 to 14, but the 2013 number is reflective of the 250,000 that the town gave us. It's inclusive of that, so our budget increase really, when you look apples to apples, is the 2.5%.
Right.
Right.
2.8%.
Right.
That's the difference.
So important when
Make a note.
this FY 2013 isn't our budget per se.
no, it's the cost.
It's the real cost.
It's the real cost. So,
Yeah.
so just to go a little bit further onto the next page, because we're still continuing with.
Can I
So-
just ask
okay.
one
Yeah,
question
absolutely.
here
Yes,
before,
of course.
before you
Of
jump
course.
ahead? Because when I was just looking at the line items
Yeah.
for 13 and 14.
Yes.
And under residential, we have 1 student at a tuition of 233,000,
Yes.
and then in 2014 it's 1 student, but that tuition has dropped considerably.
The
Partial year.
person is
Partial year,
aging out
okay.
Oh,
mid-year,
so he's only, okay.
so we
Yes.
budgeted the
Right.
appropriate amount.
Okay.
Right. So,
I
ahead,
just
Pam.
had
Yep,
a
go
question.
ahead.
You said in the last couple days, the governor had talked about Chapter 70 increasing that.
Yes.
Has he said anything about circuit breaker?
yeah, let me just see what he said.
No, I don't think he has. The
me
concern
just
that
see.
we would have with that would be if he's going to reduce circuit breaker to fund other other areas.
Right.
Yeah, I will be happy to provide you with the information that I got
I
today.
haven't seen anything on circuit breaker.
It's a special education allowance for tuition out students. There's something, he's got something in there, about that. So
Oh, yeah,
I'll,
I see the line. It says,
Yeah.
this would reduce the amount needed in circuit breaker. So he's gonna give us more in chapter 70
He's saying-
for a special ed student.
yeah, right, there's an
In your
allowance.
base.
He's increasing 10,
And less
10K
in
per
circuit breaker?
Right, because he's saying that he's gonna give it for every special ed student.
Right.
Then it might balance out. No?
Well, we don't know that.
You don't know.
See, then
Okay.
this is where the issue is going to come with presenting these numbers to FinCom, or to anybody for that matter. If they're going to make an assumption like that, where they're going to increase the Chapter 70 funding, which goes directly to the town,
Right.
with an earmark of
Earmark
it should help with special education. If that Chapter 70 funding doesn't come to the schools, that's where we run into the
Exactly,
disconnect.
yes, I'm not,
Because they don't need if they
They don't
chap-
mandate that it goes to, they recommend that it goes.
Well, it's aid to education, but it's not a mandate
It's
like
not
you
linear.
said. When we got
And-
when we got the stimulus money, they very clearly said that stimulus money needs to be in the schools. And that was crystal clear. But as Anna's saying, it's not stated that 100% of Chapter 70 money aid to education, because the town also handles about $2 to $3 million worth of other educational expenses for vocational technical schools and
Health insurance.
choice and charter, health insurance for the employees that we have. I mean, all of that counts toward the town's contribution.
but circuit breaker is definitely for schools.
Correct.
That's, you
Correct.
can't
It's
do
only
anything
for
else.
schools.
It's only for schools, right.
Right.
Okay.
But typically they won't do the increase on that. They'll just do a decrease and then bring it back up to the original level.
Okay.
So one of the things that always comes up is this issue of, oh, well, you have expenses in these high
Oh,
cost.
you did a great calculation on that.
Yeah, high cost. I told you you'd like it. High cost special education students. What people don't understand is how the reimbursement works. So, word number one is, you have to incur the expense in the year in which it happens. So tomorrow, we have a student who moves in, and on their individualized education plan from the place they're coming, it says they need a one-to-one, they're in a residential placement. They don't even come to Georgetown, their parent moved here, so we're responsible, let's just say. So here we haven't budgeted for that, okay? But arguably, we have to pay for it this year, but next year, depending on whether or not this child is eligible, we're eligible for circuit breaker, which we're gonna talk to you about how somebody becomes eligible in 1 minute. The following year, we may get some of that money back to offset it. The challenge is, in a year like we had 2 years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we ended up having a $200,000 change in a student's placement, and we didn't budget for that. So we didn't have any choice but to come up with the money. We froze the budget. We redirected money. The following year, we did get some reimbursement for it, but it has to be. You have
No,
to
that was
spend.
the year that they lowered the reimbursement.
Yeah, yeah, and it went from 72% to 38%.
38.
But the point is, it's not, it's in arrears. You have to put the money up front to get a certain percent. So then people say, oh, well, you get 72% reimbursement on every cost for tuition and transportation.
No.
So what you have to know, number one, is that circuit breaker you do not get a reimbursement for transportation. If it costs $40,000 for a student, that's 100% on the district.
And if you need someone to travel with the student, some kind of aid,
That's not.
That's on the district.
That's on the district as well.
Right. So, now, in the case of tuition, so Joan did a phenomenal job on this, I think. So what we did is these are basically these are our students, okay? No names, no identifying schools, none of that, because it's for the purpose of illustration. You can see the annual tuition, the transportation cost, so that obviously the total cost. Then, if a student is based on the state's formula, you can see it up above the 39,816. The state's formula is 9994 times 4, so that's where they come up with the 39.
It's the state average foundation budget.
Right. So if a student requires, let's say it costs $18,000 for a student, it doesn't qualify for any reimbursement. The district is 100% responsible for the $18,000. Okay. So, and then you take that threshold and you multiply it by 72%. So if you just go down and follow that train just for the first one across, total cost less that threshold, because this particular student does qualify for that, and that's the reimbursement amount. The interesting numbers are at the bottom, because when you look at the total cost of 1.4 million and change expended, and total reimbursement is $300,000. I think that's a very important way to explain this to people, because I don't think people understand.
Absolutely.
And because we were talking to Mr. Lacy on
Yes.
another meeting, and he was under the impression we got 72% of the
Of-
250. Of the 250, if we spent it all, that we
Right.
would get 72% of
This is
it.
a very good illustration, yes.
And we've been
Yeah.
explaining that we only get 72% of the difference of the tuition and
And
39,000.
nothing for transportation.
Nothing for transportation.
So what we will do next.
And we try, for transportation, we try to do our best to minimize those costs, like
Right.
sharing ride, sharing transportation with other
Calling
towns.
around to get the least expensive
alternatives.
route.
We had looked at buying vans a few years ago.
leasing vans.
Leasing vans.
Maybe could be looked
And
at
then
again.
parents can also, we offer parents the ability to drive their children to and from, and we reimburse them, which is cheaper than,
Much cheaper.
far cheaper than
Right.
hiring a service to take their children. So we really try to, go to every avenue that we can to economize.
Yeah. So the next step would be for you to get a budget binder that would take each of these things and separate them basically by school.
Okay.
So you'll see that breakdown, and where there's a line that changes up or down, there's gonna be an explanation for each line and what that difference, is, okay? And that document is the one Barbie and Rob, I mean, we're gonna break it apart, but it's the concept of what Barbie and Rob looked at the other day as budget and finance, and the administrative team had an opportunity to look at it on Tuesday, and ask any questions that they have. And then you'll just go through and debate. Now, we do need to schedule, we meaning Joan, myself, probably budget and finance with athletic director Chris DeFranco, because Chris has put together a few proposals on what might be done to, stabilize the athletic program going forward. That meeting does need to happen before, we're trying to get that scheduled now.
Because the thing that I mentioned at the beginning was what we have all the pieces that FinCom needs. We have them, but we have some big holes that we haven't addressed. We haven't gone through the revolving account balances
Right.
to see where we are on them and what kind of funding we can expect out of them. School choice, we have to talk about whether we're going to open spots up, because that's a funding source. But we have to walk a fine line where do we have the ability to open the spots and the space so that we're not shortchanging our own students and using it strictly as a funding source. Because the way to solve the problem would be to open up as many spots as we need the revenue, and there we go. But that's not
We have
fair to the
consider
students that we have.
The impact on class
in it,
size.
right.
Exactly.
Right.
So we need to go through that. Athletic funding, there's going to be an issue there.
He has like, I think
Two or three proposals, yeah.
So I encourage everyone that has been at our athletic discussions that have said they don't understand the budget and why we can't do it to please, present your questions, ask questions, and really step up and learn about it. We also haven't talked about grants. So
Which-
those are all things that
Yeah.
go into coming up with our bottom line to say, is this the right number or not? So while we do have the pieces, they are very much subject. to
Right, I will
change.
tell you that for Chris, we don't expect additional funding in the grants unless something in this, I saw in the governor's notes that they talked about increasing early childhood funding. So
funding.
that could be a possibility, more grants there. Chris's proposals that I have not had a chance to really go through, I did go through to see if he had requested any more money from the district budget, and he didn't, although he would still be relying on that
School choice.
33,000, I think, is
Yeah,
school choice.
33.
And I do have to give you a detailed report on the revolving, where we stand with each revolving, and what now we're going to charge to it, because it's different from last year.
Right.
Right.
Right. So, those are the next steps.
Just went to my list.
Yeah,
See
that's
what ones I had on there.
And again, when we talk about special education, regular education, I always feel like I want to say, we're pulling these out, not because we want to pit regular ed against special ed. They're all our children. This is, you know, we love the fact that we're public education and everybody's welcome and it's inclusive. It's just that for the benefit of the folks who want to know where the actual drivers are in the budget, other than salaries, special education is the other driver. And again, students who need specialized services, you know, we don't begrudge them that. It's just, the numbers are just to illustrate, you know, what the current situation is in the district regarding, you know, regular and special education.
And the idea that it's not as easily predictable as the regular education. There's a lot more moving pieces.
That's
that-
right.
This is a lot of the focus.
Yeah, and
It's,
if you think,
it's
you know,
in
that's-
everybody's best
Well, because
interest
at any
to
And the numbers are big,
And then-
they're big ticket
Carol,
numbers.
am I-
want
am I
everybody to have a free and
not
appropriate
mistaken
education.
that
It's
at
just
any
when you're
point-
discussing the budget, it's difficult to predict.
a parent
Right.
during the school year, a parent could ask to have their child assessed for special as special needs, and if it turns out that that child is indeed in need of services, then we are obligated to provide
Absolutely.
those services.
Absolutely.
To define the means. So, but that could happen. We
Anytime.
can't predict. It could happen at any time. I
That's
mean,
right.
I think issues pop up. Development is not, you know, a neat linear process.
No, it's
We're
not.
dealing
No,
with
and it's-
human development,
And it doesn't work on the school budget cycle
yes.
either.
or on any, you know, particular timeline. So we have to account for
Yes, we
and
do.
be prepared for those kinds of variations and when they will pop up, and we can't predict them.
That's right.
No, and you also have, you know, people move, you know, for whatever reason.
In and
They
out
move
of
in
the
and
district.
they move out.
Exactly.
That's right.
They do. And again, they don't follow our budget cycle. So,
Right.
you know, we have to, you know,
Need to be responsible.
we need to respond
Yeah.
to whatever occurs.
You know, and because we try to budget actuals, you know, because we obviously, every dollar is important to us, and we're trying to get the greatest value for every dollar, for all kids, benefit of all kids. We don't budget in extra money for certain things as contingencies, like probably we should, and that most places
Well, in
probably
an ideal
do.
world, we would.
In an ideal world, we would, but it's, you know, it's important to us to have our reasonable class sizes and to be able to offer the curriculum that, you know, our students need, and to be able to offer a well-rounded education for our students.
Absolutely.
And so we deal honestly and upfront with what the actual costs are for our operation, and, you know, we have to make adjustments, you know, if things come up. And that's the situation we find ourselves in. And then the other thing the committee will have to talk about is if in fact the FinCom does not give us what this budget is, and you can vote things up or down in your deliberations. Sure. But let's assume nothing changes, then, you know, we would need to come back and have a conversation about, okay, what is our action plan about that? What it be about that? You know, what are we going to recommend reducing from our budget to meet a certain?
But that's after we have all the details.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We
Yeah,
need a lot
that's
more
yeah.
detail
Like
for
you
it.
can. I mean,
That's right.
For
But that's one of the things you'll have to do.
For us to pick a line right now and say, you know, Pearlie's at the top. Say, oh, you know, Pearlie needs to go down by, you know, whatever.
We can't do that without seeing.
Yeah,
what the
there's not.
specifics are. Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
you
not-
guys have done an amazing job pulling this together and putting it in a usable,
Absolutely, yeah.
readable format. I think it's fantastic. And
So is this a document that's available to the public? That anybody who wanted
It's a
to
public,
see it?
anytime it's discussed in this
Now
setting,
it
it's a
is.
public
Yep.
record, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so clear. I mean, it's just really.
Good.
actually, we haven't had it. I mean, in the last few years, I don't think I've seen anything this clear with all the background on it. So I really like it.
You like numbers, Ann.
I
Yeah.
like it, but I like getting started off on it with this,
Well,
this much clarity.
The
It
budget
really
shouldn't
is.
be, as I said, painful,
Shouldn't be
you
a
know,
big
it shouldn't be,
mystery.
it
No.
really,
It
you
should
know,
be an
it should
open
be an
process
open
and
process.
understandable to
Yeah,
anyone who would
Yeah.
like to know.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So
Sometimes it's just, you have to take it in bite-sized pieces.
right. So I think that
Absolutely.
do we need to vote?
I don't think so, Ann.
There's no vote to be taken, but what I think our next step will be to deliver this to FinCom. Are we?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I guess you could decide whether or not,
Yeah.
do you want them to, do you wanna walk them through the same? I mean, part of our goal tonight was to kind of do a dry run with you, you know, to see.
I don't see any reason, I mean, they're asking for this, I don't see any reason to hold them off.
I would just like to perhaps develop one more spreadsheet that, I tried to do it before I
Yeah,
got
I
here, but I got a number, but I think that if you look at the actuals with special ed tuition out, they were broken up into schools. So as you can see, if you look down the bottom, FY12 actuals was 0 for tuition.
And we know that that's not the case.
Right, so it was broken up in the schools. In addition, I went searching to try to find what was the real cost of special ed in FY11 and FY12. And I found that there was money charged to circuit breaker, which was, you know, where it should be, and money charged to the IDEA grant that we talked about before. So you can't look at anything and say this was the true special ed cost. So I did start to do it. It's not detailed enough, but it really hasn't gone up that extreme as it seems because the costs were charged other places.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure as a committee if you received from the special ed director or the business manager what special ed really costs, like those 2 spreadsheets we did. I don't think that you know, if they were pulling from their munis reports, you don't see it because they're segregated
Yeah, there are other
accounts.
parts, yeah.
It's like talking about food services. You never see that in a report because it's a segregated account, sort of like revolving. So I don't want people to think that, you know, even on here, the FY13 revised only shows 948,000. Well, that's because, you know, it wasn't budgeted appropriately because they went by the previous year where they budgeted one whole, you know, a big tuition and a grant and then circuit breaker. So I think it would be important for that before you go to FinCom that they see that we are doing our best to control special ed cost and that it isn't going up by 15%.
Yeah, I think the 15% is, we talked about that,
Right.
it's good to point that out, that it isn't the case, but the number of students varies and their placements vary too.
Right.
So you could have fewer kids that cost more, or you could have more kids that
Right, I
cost
mean,
less.
I think
Yeah.
that if FinCom were to say, why are you not being more careful with your special ed? But, I mean, that's just not a reasonable question. There's no.
It's not.
It's
I
not
think
something we
I
have
think they've
control
learned
over.
a lot
I think that
about special
I
education.
think over the years since Carol's been here, I mean, we've been really fortunate to develop some amazing programs within the district that we've been able to keep a number of students going to school with their neighbors, with their friends in the same building, and that saved us on placing them in out of district. And unfortunately, that's not the case for everybody. There are some situations where we can't possibly accommodate them, but we try to do our best, and we try to find the right placement for each individual child. And because Carol said, if someone moves in and they're already at wherever they are, we're still funding them to go to wherever.
Or if you get a residential placement that you're not expecting, you know, out of $1.4 million, a $300,000 placement is a huge component.
Yeah,
You know, which is what I'd call an outlier. You know, you don't see those
Right.
very often. So that's why it is important. That's why we broke it down like we did. You know, just so you can see the variability.
So I think the management standpoint is the great programs that we've developed in-house, and then unfortunately the out-of-district placements. I think we manage as best we can.
We do.
Certainly we're not, you know, saying, you know, we're not just saying, okay, yeah, you need to go. Wherever we really look at the whole process. And
Try a lot of things, make adjustments to programs, work with families. Because we truly do believe if we can accommodate the students here and provide them with a real world experience within their community, that's in their best interest. And it's in the best interest of our children who are regular education too, to see how important, you know, all kinds of people are to the world in which they're gonna live, you know?
right.
So if you have any other questions, we certainly would be happy to answer them. Otherwise, that would conclude what we have to present to you tonight.
I think that, I mean, I understand your point, Joan, but I think that this should really be sufficient for FinCom and let them come to us with questions about why that discrepancy, if they have that question, and then we can and then you can do the work to explain it. But
Okay.
I
But
just,
but for the committee's purpose, the
Right.
benefit, we
I
can
mean-
We
include
should-
that, we
yeah.
can include that in our documentation.
sure.
I really like the way it was laid out, and
We said we're gonna try to tell you a story,
Um,
from big to little.
You do a great job.
no, I mean, and especially for you sitting through this for your first year, to be able to digest it in one
It's-
meeting.
Excellent,
It speaks volumes to how well you presented it.
yes.
So I guess we should vote to. I'm trying to think what we
I don't know if
vote
you have
on.
to vote, or
I
you
don't
just
think
have to
we'd
have to
vote.
have a consensus that this documentation is sufficient to go to FinCom and.
Yeah, I guess, are there any,
Objections,
questions,
yeah.
objections, or issues with presenting this document? With cleaned up with a couple things that we talked about.
Private date is good,
Yeah.
good idea. Yeah, okay.
No
You know,
worries.
yeah, if that's,
The numbers are right, that's what's
That's all I
important.
cared about.
yeah. Does anyone have an issue with presenting this to
No,
FinCom in
I
2
think that's
weeks?
fine. I agree with Alana. If they have questions, then we can
It's what
answer
they're
them.
asking
Yeah.
for. They seem to want it
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, and I say give it to them.
Okay.
Don't
So
keep
I
them
will-
waiting.
I will have,
mean-
backup, I'm going to that meeting, so I will have the backup if there was a more specific question. Because
Okay.
you won't have gotten it yet, right, because
That's right.
I
We
mean,
wouldn't,
gotten
yeah,
what?
correct.
You won't
We
have
wouldn't,
gotten the
we won't have
next-
any of the backup.
next,
no.
so I'll bring.
Yep.
I'll clean up what I gave Bobby and Rob the other day and have it ready to go, and then you can all have it, and then you'd have the answers.
I mean, you explained the story behind these numbers very well to us, so I would think that FinCom would be able to hear it too if they
Sure.
wanted.
Okay. Great,
Yeah. All right, great.
thank you.
So, anything, do we have anything else?
I
think that's it.
I don't think you had,
The,
yeah, I don't think you have anything else.
no, I think that was it. The only, we have a meeting on February 9th with FinCom that we were talking about.
Yeah, who's going?
I don't know what everyone's schedule is like.
I'll try to
I don't
make
know
it.
what you're like that day. I was gonna, my suggestion was if we could do it, and this is, I have no idea what schedule's like, first thing in the morning.
I prefer first thing in the morning.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my schedule looks like 9 to 12 is fine. Do you want me to suggest 9?
Mine, I would suggest 9.
9, okay.
February
you
9th
want
is
all the-
Saturday?
If everyone can go, that's great. If not, that's fine too. I understand. Budget and finance should be there, and I will be there. If you guys come, that would be fantastic. 'Cause it's great.
Right?
And
Where is
according to here,
Here, okay.
actually, yeah, and I think it's a half hour.
Okay.
Or from what Sandy explained,
Yeah.
it should be a quick meeting. And I believe if we get this to them in advance, that will just make it
Much easier.
much
So you're gonna ask that we be put on the agenda
I'm gonna ask to go on at 9. I already asked the other day, and she said Mike was starting to do the schedule, so I'm gonna ask if we can get on at 9.
Okay, so are you gonna send it, an email to Mike?
I'm gonna send it to Mike and Sandy,
Okay,
and I'll copy you guys and say,
okay,
you know,
great.
9. 9 works best for everybody.
Yeah, I guess we
For
just
half
have to
an hour.
check with Rob. Is he good for 9? Do we know?
I don't know,
I don't know.
unless he's an icicle right now.
He has something to warm his house, a fireplace, something.
So and then we'll schedule the March 7th meeting.
Yes, we should post that for
Um,
7.
Okay. Then I guess the only 2 other things is everyone remember Casino Night, which is a PTA fundraiser tomorrow night at the Black Swan. Tickets are available at the door, we think.
Yes.
Okay. And then, as Cole talked about, Guys and Dolls, February 7th, 8th, and 9th at the high school auditorium. And tickets go on sale, we're thinking next Thursday,
Yeah, the 31st.
the 31st. So parents, if you want to get tickets, send money in with your children to buy them during lunch. And it's $8 for students, 11 for adults.
That's right.
All right. Any other questions? All right, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you all very much.
Call me, because I wanna send you.